Hello, everyone. It's Deb Kuether, and I am doing part two of a video that I started where I am going over the handouts that I received when I attended a training in Milwaukee Public Schools called Beyond Diversity. And I attended this training in 2018 and 2019. And in the first video, I go over day one of the agenda and the handouts that were provided to participants. I want to reiterate that what I'm doing is not trying to recreate the training in any way, shape, or form, but rather just expose you to the handouts that were provided to participants when we attended so that you can have that exposure. And if you have any response or reaction to the information that was shared, that is the only purpose. So I'm going to jump back over and I'm going to go to, so these were the handouts and these were the ones that I talked about in the first video. I'm not going to go over anything that I talked about really in the first video. You can go watch that video if you want to, but I am going to jump to, I kind of left off at the homework assignments. And after day one, and before we came to day two, we had to complete the homework assignments. And part of those homework assignments was reading some articles and being ready to discuss those articles with people in attendance at the training. So I was kind of thinking about like, how can I tackle these articles without sitting here and reading the entire article, because nobody wants to listen to that. So I think what I'm going to do is an old college trick that some of us may have or may not have used in the past, which is I'm going to read the first paragraph and I'm going to read the last paragraph. And if you find any of the content of interest, then you could dig into reading the entire article on your own. And that would be something that I would offer. I think it's better than me cherry picking a few of the quotes to talk about. Although I will say if I did that, I would intentionally pick provocative quotes because that is the educator in me. I am supposed to, as an educator, I want to provoke people to talk about things that are maybe a little uncomfortable and pushing the line and get really deep into new thinking if possible. But because I don't want to push that here, I'm instead going to introduce you to the topics and you can decide if you want to read more. So this is White is a Color by Glenn Singleton, who is the author of the book and the creation of the seminar Beyond Diversity. And so I'll go ahead and read the first and last paragraph. Developing and facilitating Beyond Diversity, a 2-day seminar on deinstitutionalizing racism, has served as a powerful way for me personally to get in touch with the pervasiveness of racism in the United States. In fact, I am convinced that racism, more so than any other technical, social, or pedagogical condition, prevents us from actualizing our professional and moral obligation to develop and liberate the innate imagination and intelligence of every American. All right, so that was the first one. I like in this one too because I know that in the training session we did come back and talk about these or respond to these prompts that are on the side of the article here, and I'll just read you what the prompts are. What essential questions, comments, or concerns arise for you as you reflect on white as a color? How does Singleton describe and or define whiteness? How closely does his description, definition align with your own personal concept of what it means to be white? And what, if any, connections can you make between Singleton's journey into whiteness and your own everyday experiences as well as the experiences of people of color in your organization? All right, now I'll read the last paragraph. When I returned home to San Francisco on Tuesday, I was greeted by a phone call from my best white friend, Eric. How was your trip? He asked, as I instantly reflected on my racism-filled adventure and then thought about how foreign my racial reality is. Still, to even my closest white friends, I sighed and uttered, "It was great." Why did I lie to Eric? Because in my experience, Eric and other white people tend to redefine these patterns of white behavior as an individual's personable, foible, or character flaw. Clearly, white people more often do not consider themselves to be part of a white collective experience or group. Frankly, I am simply too exhausted sometimes to shatter another white person's belief that his is a universal human experience. But because I realize that as long as whiteism is defining reality for white people, injustice, struggle, and inequality will continue to erode the spirit of non white people of color. The very next day, I mustered up the energy and humility to tell Eric my personal truth about New Orleans and San Francisco, too, for that matter. All right, so that was that first article. And the second homework article is called Entitlement, and it's by Randall B. Lindsay. So that is a different author, and I will go ahead and read the first and last paragraphs. Cultural competence theory is constructed to identify barriers that exist in society. Identifying barriers to the implementation of new ideas, programs, procedures, or techniques has long been recognized as an important step in creating change in organizations. Okay, and then there's some citations there. Barriers to cultural competence include the presumption of entitlement and unawareness of the need to adapt. In this country, issues that concern people of color and women are too often viewed as their problems within society. For cultural competence theory to be applied to an organization, these barriers must be thoroughly understood. To contribute to an understanding of these barriers, this article describes white male entitlement, which is the converse of the institutionalized forms of oppressions: racism, sexism, ethnocentrism, and heterosexism that penalize people within organizations for their membership to non-dominant culture groups. All right, now this one is several pages long. So that's why I'm just going to go to the last part here again, and then you can decide if you want to dig into this. Entitlement is an ethical and moral issue that festers at the core of this country. It is an issue tied to the freedom which we have gained as a nation. That freedom is now being sought by a diverse population in the political, social, and economic corners of the country. In recent years, professional and popular literature has the notion that the economic survival of this country may rest on our ability to use the talents of an increasingly diverse workplace. While there is no doubt that this is an accurate, though cynical, projection, it must be only one brick in the construction of a secure nation. To that end, we must examine the total spectrum of entitlement. The most powerful sector of the entitlement continuum must be the focus of attention. That is, the 70% of this country's population which is white and the nearly half which is male. The culturally competent leader must acknowledge and articulate advantages that accrue to people based on their skin color, their gender, and their socioeconomic class. All right, there we go. And now it moves into day 2, where they examine whiteness, or it's called examining whiteness. And I won't read the different points that were colored here, covered here, but I will point out a few of them. Here's one called Decentering Whiteness. I know people have said that to me many times. Reverse white racism and affirmative action. And then we did an activity called My Personal Action Plan. So there's that compass thing. That's kind of a normalizing thing, more of our notes. I won't read that because my writing is really sloppy and it's hard to read. Courageous conversation, 3 tiers. We kind of talked about these in the beginning. Engage through your own personal racial experiences, beliefs, and perspectives while demonstrating respectful understanding of specific historical as well as contemporary, local, and immediate racial contexts. Sustain yourself and others in the conversation through mindful inquiry into those multiple perspectives, beliefs, and experiences that are different than your own. And deepen your understanding of whiteness and interrogate your beliefs about your own association with and relationship to racial privilege and power. Okay, so they made us go back to the white privilege exercise. You might remember that's that thing, or not that thing, but the survey that everybody had to take on white privilege, where you get a score. How much white privilege did you have? Okay, what is whiteness? Let's see what they say whiteness is. Color, primary presence, positioning, white privilege, stages of avoidance, ignorance to competing victimization. Okay. Culture, being, feeling, and acting white. White racial bonding, avoidance, individualism, universality, decontextualization. And consciousness, thinking and reasoning white. White racial identity development. Color blindness, guilt, shame, anger, helplessness, and anti-racist. And I know that there's a lot of anti-racist training in our district. There goes Dog Central. Of course. And, you know, I'm not making, again, a statement about the value of it, but I do hear people when they are, especially presenting at the board meetings, they announce themselves as being an anti-racist educator. So there is a whole training branch on that. What do I believe to be some defining aspects of white culture? Hey, that was an activity we did. Capitalism, passive, bland, unaware, order and control, prim and proper, country club mentality, keeping up with the Joneses. All right, well, money, a higher economic status, these were the things that people were talking about. What does it mean to be white? Segregation. Most whites live, grow, play, learn, love, work, and die primarily in racial segregation. Yet, our society does not teach us to see this as a loss. Individualism. Whites are taught to see themselves as individuals rather than as a part of a racial group. It follows that whites are racially objective and thus can represent the universal human experience, while people of color can only represent their race. Focus on intentions over impact. We are taught that racism must be intentional and that only bad people commit it. Thus, a common white reasoning is cross-racial conflicts is that as long as we are good people and don't intend to perpetrate racism, then our actions don't count as racism. And white fragility. In a white dominant society, challenges to a white world view are uncommon. The racial status quo is uncomfortable for us. We haven't had to develop the skills, perspectives, or humility that would help us to engage constructively. As a result, we have very little tolerance for racial discomfort and respond poorly. Well, there you go. That's what it means to be white, in case people who are white did not know that. And so then this was an exercise we had to do. Racial consciousness and the privilege of whiteness, stages of avoidance. There's ignorance, unconsciousness. I don't know. It never occurred to me. I don't know, but I think I do. I have a black friend. We're all just human. Denial. It's all over now. Racism is over. We've made so much progress. Blame. Racism only exists because people of color focus on it. You bring all this on yourself. Redefinition and minimization. Racism is a problem, but we really need to deal with poverty. This isn't a race issue. It's about personal responsibility. It's only a few people. Incidental racism versus institutional racism. Unintentionally, I did not mean to offend you. Counterattack, competing victimizations. I'm oppressed too. Okay, how does systematic racism impact you? So there's institutionalized white racism, reverse white racism, internalized white racism, intraracial white racism, and interracial white racism. Okay. Systemic racism. Who really benefits from affirmative action? Students of color. Oh, that was this portion. Exotics. Those were their words. I took notes from there. I can't even read what that says. Genius, VIPs, athlete. Oh. Alumni and private schools. Oh, that's the biggest chunk right there. Athletes. I do not know what this is. Okay, so it ends here, or I think we're getting close to the end, but here it ends with a quote from Frederick Douglass. But it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. All right. And so that was the end of the 2-day Beyond Diversity 2018-2019 training packet that was held by Milwaukee Public Schools at the United Way in Milwaukee. And I did attend this and other portions back in 2018 and 19. So let me know your thoughts. What do you think of being in a training like this and having a district-wide training like this for all the employees? I'll be curious to know your thoughts. And thanks for tolerating the dogs, because I'm quite sure you can still hear them barking. Figures. All right, take care.